there's quite a few things to talk about that's happened over the past week or so. The first one is obviously Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, Housing Minister, and the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, has resigned due to her tax affairs. Yeah, obviously, I think she's a massive hypocrite because she's always had a lot to say about people and taxes, and she's one of them sort of tax the rich, even though she's rich and doesn't want to pay a lot of tax. So she's a massive hypocrite there. But obviously, what's happened is obviously quite recent with the £40,000 that she should have paid in stamp duty for her second home. A few people have come to her defence and said that it's perfectly normal for people to try and avoid paying too much tax and to try and alleviate their tax burden, which to some degree I agree with, but not with Angela Rayner. I'm not saying that because she's a political opponent. I am saying that because she, as a member of His Majesty's government, her party, or her as part of the cabinet and her party, are the people that decide how much tax we should pay and what that tax should be spent on. So I try and pay as little tax as legally possible, as I'm sure most people do. But I don't determine what the tax is spent on. My reason for paying as little tax as legally possible is the fact that I don't agree with a lot of what is being spent on. I don't agree with housing illegal immigrants. I don't agree with foreign aid. I don't agree with lots of other things, all these DEI projects and things like that that they spend money on. So the fact that I don't agree with what a lot of the money is spent on gives me moral grounds to try and pay a low amount of tax. Whereas somebody who's making the decisions, who's campaigned for the party that is making the decisions and things like that, that excuse completely falls away. And another thing I'd like to say about tax is that I give money to charity from time to time. I don't make any regular donations to any charities, but I spend a lot of my own money on National Front things and stuff like that. So, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to use my own money for National Front things and to help other political things that I agree with, and to help charities from time to time, raise money for charities. And I'm proud to do that. But when I pay taxes, I'm not proud of that. When I pay taxes, I feel like I've been robbed. I feel vulnerable. I feel a victim, and things like that. So it's really, people should feel proud about paying taxes. But I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way that I feel, that we're just being robbed, and you feel like you're being used. And go on to the comments. I'll put some up in a minute. You feel like you're being used by paying these taxes. Well, I do anyway. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. But like I said, Angela Rayner is part of the system that is spending our money, so she doesn't have that excuse. And also, it reminded me of a story a while ago, and apparently it's actually happened twice now. I must have missed one of them, but I think the first one was during lockdown. She spent, we spent £249 on a pair of Apple iPod earphones, and I don't know if she lost them, but 2 years later she might have got a newer pair. 2 years later she's buying another pair with our money. I understand, obviously, doing government work, that people need equipment and that for that, but I've got headphones that cost about 20 quid and they work perfectly well. I don't know if I was a music connoisseur listening to something while I chill out, something like that, I might prefer a more expensive pair of headphones, but I'm not. But I obviously pay for my own headphones, and anyone who's getting stuff for free off the taxpayer, there should be like a maximum they can spend on all sorts of things like that. I haven't done it for a few years, but I used to check for a couple of MPs, I used to check their expenses and what they were buying. And not most MPs buy a new laptop every year that we pay for. And I don't know what happens to the resale of the old laptop. Firstly, whether it's safe to resell it, because I assume someone professionally wipes the memory, so there's no classified information on there. But what happens? Do they just give that to their kids or their wife or husband, or does it get resold? Is it reused for party political things? But you don't need a new laptop every year. My laptop's 3 or 4 years old now. I can understand why people would probably update them every other year, but every year seems quite a lot to me. So it seems like, again, I think it's cross-party. I think the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, they're all at it. They're all spending our money on stuff for themselves. They're getting about 90 grand a year as MPs. More than that if they're on committees, got cabinet positions or shadow cabinet positions, and things like that. So like they're completely and utterly taking us for a ride. I said last week I was hoping that she wouldn't resign. Obviously she did resign, but I would have rather she just stayed on and remained an embarrassment to the government. Which, speaking of embarrassments to the government, it brings me on to in fact, I'll have a quick look at the comments. I'm doing this on my laptop now. I tried to get the laptop and the computer up at the same time, and it wouldn't do it. It was trying to log me out of one or the other. Oh, what's that number then? It's a bit hard to do the comments on my phone. My missus was going to do the comments, but she had to do something else, so she's not here at the moment. I'll put that up. That guy? Oh, that's gone up, that one, yeah. I'll try and get rid of that subscribe thing that I put up as well. Just don't want that up for the whole thing. I don't even know how to put it up now. It's frustrating because on my laptop it's easier for dealing with comments and things like that, and then on oh, that'll be the one, won't it? Is that it? That's gone now. I might put it up again later, but yeah, my laptop's easier for dealing with comments, and the phone seems to have a better camera on it. I might have just turned that lamp off behind me and see if it's a bit better. It's a bit brighter. So I'll try to be all arty and have a lamp in the background like you see on a lot of these podcast things, and it didn't seem to work. Well, like I was saying, the Angela Rayner thing brings me on to my next point, which is Britain's ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, who has recently turned out to have sent a letter saying that he was best friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and apparently he carried on doing business deals with him after he was convicted as a paedophile. And again, with Peter Mandelson, that is someone who's got a long history of embarrassing the government. I'll stop short at saying he's corrupt, but there's been a lot of question about his character and his honesty. He's worked as a professional lobbyer while sitting in the House of Lords. He had to resign from government several times under the last Labour administration, and also when Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, he was deliberately undermining Corbyn, and then now we've got him as our ambassador to the United States when he was a massive Romaniac who probably still wants us to have another referendum on leaving the EU, or to just force us back into it. So it looks to me like we've got someone in America as the ambassador to Britain who would like Brexit to fail. I would have thought could possibly be looking to undermine us, and and it now looks like he's compromised by this Jeffrey Epstein thing. So it seems to me untenable. I haven't checked the news for an hour or so, so he may have already resigned. I don't know if anyone's telling me in the comments that he has stepped down or something like that. I know that Keir Starmer was today meeting with the president of Israel, Herzog. So I don't know if he was getting permission to sack Mandelson or anything like that. So he may have gone by now for all I know. But it seems to me to be a complete hypocrisy that we've got someone like that as our ambassador. Also, he's taken numerous trips to Israel. He's of Jewish descent, and his loyalty has got to be questioned when it comes to that. I just go on next to Stand Up to Racism. They just had a meeting at the TUC Fringe, and again, this is an organisation that has professionally printed placards and banners, organises large demonstrations, and then when they have a meeting, they haven't got anyone who can really string a sentence together. They've got no great speakers who can stand up, no one like Richard Edmonds or anything like that. Nobody who's a crowd puller. They had supposedly 100 people at that meeting. I've seen photographs that look like 40 or 50, but they don't even seem to put videos up for a lot of these things. And when they do, like an online event they had a little while ago, you just had complete and utter morons like Waylon Bennett talking absolutely rubbish without even having a proper webcam on. I've struggled with this webcam, I know, but it's nowhere near as bad as the effort by Waylon Bennett, who is who is one of the leaders of Stand Up to Racism. And I assume they spoke about this at the meeting, but they seem to be supporting Tommy Robinson for Saturday. They claim to be opposing him and things like that, like they do all of his rallies. But to me, it seems that all they do is draw attention to them and raise the profile of them. They're going into their places of work, putting up, I assume they're doing that, they've done it previously, going in, putting up posters and handing out leaflets, encouraging people to oppose it. But it just raises the profile, as well as encouraging people to oppose it. It encourages people to attend it. A lot of people go along to Tommy Robinson protest because they know that it's being opposed by Stand Up to Racism, and then by needing 3 or 4 times as many, or probably maybe 10 times as many police because there's opposition there, again that raises the profile of it. And they wouldn't do it for anyone who wasn't pro-Israel. Anyone who's not part of their Zionist agenda, they wouldn't raise the profile of. But it's completely different the way they deal with people like Tommy Robinson and the DFLA and people like that than how they deal with proper, genuine white nationalists. Which brings me on to another point with Stand Up to Racism and their supporting of violence. They openly support violence. There was Ricky Jones, obviously, that was telling a lie about razor blades on trains and encouraging people to cut people's throats, although apparently he didn't mean it. You've got Waylon Bennett, who brags about telling one of his stewards to go and threat or warn off someone, sounded like a threat to me, at one of their protests last year. You've got Diane Abbott, that encourages people to physically have physical altercations with people on protests. You've got Lewis Nielsen, who's one of their spokespersons, who was on, I think it was Sky, he was on some sort of TV news program about three weeks ago, and he was condemning, I think it was UKIP, not UKIP, whoever Farage is with at the moment, Reform. He was condemning them, saying that by them raising issues, same as what they've said about the National Front and the BNP before, that whenever we raise an issue, it causes other people to become violent. But like I always say, I don't encourage anyone to commit violence. People should be angry at what's going on. They should get active politically or peacefully demonstrate. By getting involved in violence, you have the opposite effect of what you're intending, and it doesn't do anyone any good. But these far leftists, these stand-ups of racism and hope not hate, they think that it's perfectly acceptable for their people to openly call for violence. But yet, when people on our side, or roughly on our side, people are anti-immigration or pretend to be anti-immigration, raise genuine issues. They say that could cause violence. They're absolute hypocrites. And they make complete and utter fools of themselves. Whenever I've questioned them, they can't even answer a question sensibly. I'm going to try and have a look at these comments out. Don't even know how to scroll up and down looking at these comments. I think I have to take that off the stage first and then I can scroll. Is that right? I apologise, but I'm not really going to be putting comments up today because I'm struggling with that. You're welcome to comment if you want, but I won't be putting them up because I'm struggling with that. I must be taken after Wayman Bennett. I've been watching too many of his videos and I'm becoming stupid. I even actually look quite a bit darker in this video of me lighting. I don't know if I'm becoming Wayman Bennett. So. On to my next point, which is the ongoing tube strikes. Again, I agree in principle with workers organising and fighting for better rights and better pay and conditions and things like that. I think that's something everyone should have the right to do. But I think when it comes to the tube drivers, it's just greed and holding people to ransom. They've got low. In my opinion, being a tradesman, I would consider a tube driver to be a low-skilled job, but they usually earn more than tradesmen. And all they do is, I shared a flat a couple of years ago with someone, well, probably about 8 or 10 years ago now with a tube driver, I think it's just several months to train to be a tube driver. It's not that involved. You don't have to steer it. You don't have to get directions. If you make a wrong turn, it's one of the points operators rather than the tube driver who's done that. There's safety things to go off if you go too fast, and things like that. In my opinion, that's a low-skilled job that they're getting, I think, around £60,000 a year for. And James O'Brien, the posh bloke off the radio, off LBC, to demonstrate how out of touch he is with ordinary people, he said that it'd probably be a good, not his exact words, but they probably deserve 100 grand a year in comparison to what city high flyers earn, which I suppose you could look at it that way. If people are earning millions or tens of millions, there's not that many people earning millions or tens of millions. There's probably more than there should be, but it's not as if everyone working in the city is earning millions or tens of millions. But that's what he thinks they should earn, which to me shows how out of touch he is with reality. He gets a lot of money just for doing a couple of hours a day. He probably has to spend a bit more than that doing research and counting his money and stuff like that. But if you think about it in comparison, if a tube driver should be earning 100 grand a year, tradesmen, plumbers, electricians, bricklayers, people that should be earning 200 grand a year, maybe more, because you need to be more skilled, it's harder work, it's more stressful, it's more dangerous, you've got more responsibility and things like that. So easily, if a tube driver should be on 100 grand a year, then a tradesman should be on 200 grand a year, maybe more. I know there are tradesmen earning 200 grand a year, but that tends to be people either that run their own business and have other people working for them, or are ripping people off. But most tradesmen aren't earning anywhere near 200 grand a year. And then also, if a tube driver's earning 100 grand a year, probably someone working in a coffee shop or something shouldn't be that far behind them, should be on 80 or 90 grand a year. So it'd work out that if like James O'Brien said, they put tube drivers up to 100 grand a year, and then, like I've just said, put everyone else's money up in comparison to that. It would cause massive inflation. It'd be in London anyway. It'd probably be like £12 or £15 for a coffee. You'd be paying £600 or £700 just for a tradesman to come to your house for half a day to look at something and things like that. Everything could go completely up the wall, and everything would fall apart. But that seems to me to be the idea on the left, that you just, any problem, just throw money at it. You know, and like, it's like the NHS. Oh, you just double the amount you spend on the NHS, get a load of third world doctors, hope or pretend that they're just as good as our doctors, and get on with things. If it doesn't work out, throw a load more money at it. But it's actually seems ridiculous, ridiculous to me. And the fact that they strike, like for years now, they've been discouraging people from driving in London. It must be getting on for 25 years now. Is it about 23 years since they brought in the congestion charge in London? And they've been bringing in all these, they call them pedestrian roads and zones. But to me, a pedestrian is somebody who walks. These seem to be more somewhere for people to sit around drinking coffee and people to park them electric scooters that get in everyone's way. It's actually more difficult to walk through those areas than it was before for a lot of them. But again, they've discouraged people from driving, and then before, when people were driving, if a road was closed, you'd take a different road. But then with the tube, they shut down the whole thing at the same time, and people just can't get to work. I had to phone up a colleague of mine today about something else, and I assumed he'd be in work in London, and he wasn't. He was at home sitting around drinking a cup of tea, because it was just so much hassle to get to work that it wasn't worth going in. And I'm sure throughout London there's probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that are in the same boat, that it's just not worth going in. And most of those people are on less money than tube drivers. People on loads of money, managers, people running large businesses, and people, they tend to do jobs where they can work from home, rearrange appointments, or can stay in an expensive hotel overnight, or get chauffeur driven in. I would have thought James O'Brien's probably been getting chauffeur driven into work, or at least getting a taxi. Don't know, the BBC have all the taxis lining up, and I'm sure LBC are probably the same. So he's probably had no trouble getting to work, and he's probably on a lot more money than the tube driver. But the people on less money than the tube drivers are the ones that are suffering. So I've got no compassion for them whatsoever, especially when they've got their he's the leader of the RMT anyway, the chairman or whatever they call the position. But it's a guy called Eddie Dempsey who he's protested in London against Dennis Hutchins, an army veteran who's now passed away, who was alive at the time, and they were trying to retry him for allegedly shooting at someone years ago during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And basically, they hate the British Army, they hate British soldiers, and they hate the British people, and obviously not all Irish people, but people like Eddie Dempsey that have got real chips on their shoulders and things like that. And he's protesting, he's bringing people out on strike, damaging our country, when his country is the Republic of Ireland. He considers himself an Irishman, and he should have no involvement in Britain. Definitely not bringing our capital city to a standstill. It's an act of aggression by a foreigner. He's also called for a lot more wealth tax and things like that. Why doesn't he go to his own country and call for wealth tax? It's absolutely disgusting. You've got the Republic of Ireland has got the lowest business rates. I think it's the lowest business rates in Europe, probably not as low as some of the city states, but for proper countries in Europe is I think they've got the lowest. It's about half of what they are in Britain. That's why so many companies like Google and Facebook and that tend to have their European headquarters in the Republic of Ireland, because they're paying the lower business rates. And then you've got an Irish Republican telling us that we should be taxing the rich more, which I agree with in principle. But what tends to happen is you need to close all the loopholes before you raise the taxes. If you start raising taxes on the rich while they can still move their money around, they're going to move their money around, and they're going to just pay less tax somewhere else. It doesn't work. Again, like I said, it's a brilliant idea in principle, and I think we should actually do it. But we need to close the loopholes first before doing that. I'll probably keep this meeting a bit shorter today because I can't see the comments. But I'll carry on for now. Again, I apologise for that, and it will be rectified by next time. What I might try and do is see if I can route me phone camera through my laptop, so I'm still seeing the screen on the laptop. Either that, or I might log in under a different name on my laptop. It was messing around anyway. The next point I'd like to raise is Israel and airstrikes on Qatar. But, again, you get lots of people defending it and saying they've got every right to do that. But Qatar is one of the least aggressive countries towards Israel in that region, and they do peace talks. The members of Hamas that were there for peace talks. What would the equivalent be over here if either loyalists or the IRA had blown up the Good Friday Agreement or something like that and used that as an ideal time to take out the leadership of one of the other groups or the government? Peace talks, you need some sort of element of trust to have peace talks. And from everything I've seen so far in this conflict, I'm not supporting Hamas before anyone asks for me to be arrested or anything like that. But it seems to me that Hamas take the peace talks more seriously than the Israelis do. Again, our government, I think they've condemned the attacks, but they've stopped short of sanctions or anything like that. And if it was anyone else doing that, they'd come down on them like a ton of bricks. Could you imagine if Russia did that? If Russia blew up, took out Zelensky while he was in London or Washington, it'd be absolutely pandemonium to pay for that. And you've also got, speaking of Russia, you've got that Poland has shot down a load of drones that are allegedly Russian drones. And according to the Poles, they weren't attacking Poland. They just sort of scraped through a bit of Polish airspace on their way to attack Ukraine. I've been on Russia Today, and according to them, the Russians have denied that they were even Russian drones. So I don't know if this is some sort of false flag to attack Russia and to bring us closer to World War III or not. It could very well be Russian drones, which reminds me of, it's going back quite a while now. It was definitely when Barack Obama was president. So it's probably like 10 years ago now. When you had the Turkish shot down a Russian plane, a Russian fighter, it was either a fighter or a bomber. I think it was a fighter plane, and and at least one of the pilots was murdered, not by the Turks, I think, but this was by I think it was Kurdish rebels or someone like that. But when that plane was shot down, the Turks maintained that it had invaded Turkish airspace. And whether it had or not, we don't know, but it came down over, was it Syria? I think it was Syria we're talking about now, where the fighting was going on. The plane came down over Syria, so either it hadn't been in Turkish airspace, or it had been but was leaving. And there's no justification, especially if you haven't been attacked. There's no justification to shoot down a plane that's not officially an enemy plane because you're not at war with them, that may have strayed into your airspace but is leaving. You know, generally an air force will send up planes. I'm not an expert in the air force. I've never been in the air force, but from watching other news stories about incidents other places in the world, normally like the RAF or whatever will fly, locate the suspected foreign aircraft and sort of shadow it and escort it out of British airspace. They probably would, if it refused to leave and was heading for London or a major city, they obviously would shoot it down. But I can't imagine the RAF shooting down a plane that was leaving our airspace unless A, we're actually at war with the country, or B, that it just attacks us. So again, there's similarities of it. I'm talking about 10 years ago now with the plane being shot down, maybe more, maybe slightly less. But there's similarities to that with the drones. The drones, by either account, weren't attacking Poland. Fortunately enough, being drones, no one was hurt flying them. But again, Poland making out like they've been attacked or something, at the very most, Russia's taken a bit of a liberty and flown drones, probably as a way around the Ukrainian air defence, through Poland's airspace. But there's nothing to make anyone believe that they had any intention of attacking Poland. Again, it's a point of contention that Poland's even joining NATO or anything like that, or the EU, because it was agreed with the Soviets or the Russians at the end, at the breakup of the Soviet Union, that wouldn't happen. I believe John Major promised them that. I could be wrong. I apologise, John Major, if you're watching and it isn't. And it wasn't you, but it looks like they are trying to push us closer with the wording in the media and the strong words by governments, that they are trying to push us towards World War III, which, to bring me to another point, is at what point do we realise that World War III has started? If you look back, I don't know who's seen the film Pearl Harbor. Was it like about 25 years ago? It was, or maybe 30 years ago now. It was obviously a big cinematic release, and there's a line in it when they say, "I think World War II's just started," and this was obviously Pearl Harbor. So, from a British point of view, that was well into World War II. But was it really a world war before Pearl Harbor? It was mainly a European war and an Asian war before that. And it was only after Pearl Harbor and the Americans got involved and we declared war on Japan and Germany declared war on America and all of that, it actually became a world war. So if we are either in or approaching World War III, at what point does it actually be recognised as being a world war and not being a number of separate conflicts around the world? Again, it's not something I actually know the answer to. It's just a question. I'm asking questions and I can't even see the comments. So obviously, when I was planning out what I was going to say today, I was hoping to have been looking at the comments. So the next point I've got on here is on Sunday there was a March for Israel in London. They claimed it was attended by 70,000 people. It looked a lot less than that to me from the photos and video that I've seen, but it was attended by a lot of people, and it was labelled as a campaign against anti-Semitism, but it obviously wasn't. There was lots of Israeli flags. It was Union flags flown as well, but there was lots of Israeli flags, and the supposed people against anti-Semitism always accuse people that condemn Israel of conflating Israel and Judaism. Obviously, there's a massive overlap with 80% of Jews supposedly in Britain supposedly supporting the genocide in Gaza. But the thing is, if they're against anti-Semitism and they're against people conflating Israel with Jewish people, again, they complain when someone goes and shouts at someone who's visibly Jewish about Israel. I don't know how often it happens because a lot of the time they just play the victim. But I'm sure it has happened on occasion. So they complain about that, which, to be fair, they've got a right to complain about that. But they're causing that problem themselves, and they are conflating the two things by waving Israeli flags at the supposed anti-Semitism protest. So what are they trying to achieve? To me, it looks obvious that they are basically being it's a pro-Israel demonstration under the guise of an anti-Semitism demonstration. And another point on that is, again, I'm going back 10 years ago now. I don't know if I've had a hit on the head or something, but yeah, around 10 years ago, maybe just over, there was a demonstration organised in Golders Green against the Shomrim. And for those who aren't aware of the Shomrim, they're like a Jewish security force that operate in Jewish areas in London. And they go around in what looks like police cars. They've got uniforms, and I think you need to be able to speak one of the Jewish languages. I'm not 100% on this, but to become one of the Shomrim. So it's basically a Jewish organisation, and so obviously they encourage the reporting of crime and things like that. And although it's not a bad idea to have extra security and things like that, we're paying for it. Not all of it; they do raise money themselves, but the police contribute to it, and I think the government contributes to it as well, and things like that. So what tends to happen is you tend to have Jewish areas with really low crime, because the police get heavily involved when there's a bit of graffiti that they probably put up themselves, and things like that. I say they probably put up themselves, just to clarify that. There could be groups of racists and anti-Semites going around finding a grubby looking wall that wants repainting anyway, and spray painting swastikas or Hamas on there, or going around damaging public property in Jewish areas rather than actual Jewish property and things like that. But it looks to me like someone's done it themselves. I don't go around damaging people's property, but if I did want to go and spray paint someone's wall to get at them, it wouldn't be a wall that looks like it needs painting anyway. So it looks to me like a lot of that stuff's fake. But basically, the Shomrim, they encourage people to either report and possibly fabricate crimes. Then they get extra police presence in their area. They've got the patrols as well, so you get a really low crime rate in Jewish areas that we're paying extra for, and it obviously inflates their house prices and things like that. Where we're told that everyone should be treated equally, but and a lot of people, all the Tommy Robinson lot and that, they'd be up in arms because there's been talk of Muslim patrols. I'm sure there have been Muslim patrols or Muslim patrols, but they're not getting funded and that by our government and police the same way that the Shomrim are, and they'd all be up in arms if the Muslims had this kind of service. So yes, so basically, when this protest was organised about 10 years ago in Golders Green against the Shomrim, it was supposed to be on Saturday, and Hope Not Hate, campaign against anti-Semitism, and probably, I'm not sure if it's the Board of Jewish Deputies or whoever, but basically complains that it was deliberately anti-Semitic for being held on a Saturday in a Jewish area. And firstly, what constitutes a Jewish area? Because we're told that everyone's meant to be equal, and then we get told that there's black areas, Jewish areas, and things like that. But they complained that it was anti-Semitic. It wasn't near us. Well, I say it wasn't near. It wasn't directly outside of a synagogue or anything like that. It was just going to be near the train station, and they complained that it was anti-Semitic to hold a protest against a Jewish police force or police, whatever they are, security group in what they claim as a Jewish area on their Sabbath, which is a Saturday, and the police or the home secretary or whoever it was at the time moved the protests to Whitehall, so as not to upset the Jews in their area, and they was all very happy that it got, well, I say they was happy that it got moved. They still turned up, and Whitehall caused trouble and got people arrested for their what they said or at least one person was arrested for what he said at the Whitehall protest. But they were able to get that moved because it shouldn't be or they say that we shouldn't be allowed to protest in a Jewish area on Saturday, when traditionally in Britain, Saturday is the day of protest. Obviously, Monday to Friday, most people work, and Sunday is our Sabbath. So it makes more sense to have a protest on somebody else's Sabbath rather than our own Sabbath. They don't have to attend it; they can go somewhere else. And they've done similar to the Palestinian protesters. There's a synagogue just round the corner from the BBC at Portland Place, and they've used that as an excuse to not let the Palestinians protest outside the BBC on a Saturday because it might upset the people that are not directly outside the BBC, but 5 or 10 minutes, well, 5 minutes around the corner at synagogue. So they've got that stopped. And I actually went up there 6 months or a year ago when there was a protest, and I saw an old lady getting arrested for protesting up there. To be fair, she was a bit of an idiot for doing it, but she wasn't a threat to anyone. She was and she wasn't even outside the synagogue. She was outside the BBC. So it looked out of order as someone who's neutral with that for her to be arrested. But then, bring me on to my main point. Sunday, they literally had this stage set up right outside Westminster Abbey. So that's a major cathedral in London, a Christian country, and they're having it seems to me, obviously they wasn't doing anything, as far as I'm aware, they wasn't doing anything derogatory towards the cathedral or people, Christians on a Sunday, but it seems to me a little bit like they're rubbing it in. You know what I mean? Like we can't, white British people can't protest in Golders Green. People protesting against the genocide being committed by Israel can't protest outside the BBC on a Saturday because we've got to be all careful around the Jews. But then they can hold a protest right outside Westminster Abbey. Also, as they went past the cenotaph, they didn't lower their Israeli flags. Like I said, I don't know. Well, I do know why they had Israeli flags. It's a pro-Israel demo, not an anti-Semitism demo. But in my opinion, they shouldn't have had Israeli flags anyway if it was supposed to be an anti-Semitism protest. And if I was to just start assuming that a Jew was Israeli because they had the hat and the sideburns or whatever, I'll be accused of racism for making that assumption. And so that again, they shouldn't be making the assumption themselves by waving Israeli flags. They didn't lower the flags as they went past the cenotaph. They stopped at the cenotaph. I wasn't there. I got this from watching a live stream. And then when they were at the cenotaph, they stopped supposedly singing the national anthem. And it's probably the worst rendition of the national anthem since Tommy Robinson did it once. And there was nowhere near 70,000 people singing it. There might have been 80 or 100 out of the several thousand people that were there. Again, they fly the Union Jack to try and pretend that they're with us. They're clearly not. Well, the majority of them aren't. They're purely just taking the mickey out of us and treating us like we're stupid. They know that people are wound up by the Palestinian protest, which is right. People should be wound up by that. The problem with the Israeli and the Palestinian protests is that we've had far too much immigration. There shouldn't be mass numbers of people from foreign demographics in our capital city to protest. You can't really blame people that are here for wanting to protest against the genocide. To some degree, I support their right to protest, but I don't think they've been anywhere near as disrespectful as the Israel protesters. The Israel protesters cause less disruption, but purely because there's less of them. But when it comes to the amount of people against the amount of disruption, they're probably pretty similar. Yeah. So yeah, we don't want people, whether it's Palestinians, Israelis, or Jews, or blacks, or anything like that. You get too many of them, you get protests. Anything happens anywhere in the world, and you land up getting protests on the streets of London. If there's a problem between India and Pakistan, you get problems. Even like when there's football on, you get like years ago, football hooliganism in Britain would have been people from different clubs having a row with each other. But it's got to the stage now where you're getting problems, not just with football, but with cricket as well, with when different teams play each other and hate each other. So to me, the problem with the Palestinian demos is the immigration problem, not the fact that people are protesting that they're against genocide. I think everyone should be against actual genocide. So yeah. So what was I going to say there? Yeah, another point that the Israel supporters keep making. They say that that people protesting against Israel's genocide are only protesting because it's supposedly the world's only Jewish state that is involved in it, and that people keep quiet when other countries commit acts of war or genocide against Muslim populations. But I think what people need to remember there is that the big difference is that Israel does it with the support, both politically and militarily, of our government. Our government is still sending weapons to Israel that we aren't sending to China and other places like that are also committing genocides. So there's less point in protesting crimes committed by China and Burma and other places like that, because our government isn't involved in that. So, but with what Israel's doing, our government is involved in that, so it's more appropriate to protest that. I wish that people weren't protesting it. I wish it wasn't happening in the first place. But it shouldn't really be a British thing where people are protesting about it in London. Like I said, both the Israeli protesters and the Palestinian ones. A, because it shouldn't be happening, and B, because our government shouldn't support it, and C, because we shouldn't have the immigration where we've got large numbers of people from all these different demographics in Britain. But what I'd also like to point out about that is I'm almost at the end of what I've got to say now. I'll probably go on for another 2 or 3 minutes. But I'd like to pull hope not hate on this, because I think it was about 18 months ago there was a pro-Israel demo, and I went along to try and film some of these campaigning against anti-Semitism people and to try and question them. But fortunately, I bumped into Nick Lowles from Hope Not Hate, and I managed to talk to him for about 10 minutes. And he didn't have a lot to say at the beginning, but then once he got amongst a load of his own people, he got louder and was probably trying to get me attacked, like the idiot that he is. He wouldn't dream of attacking anyone himself, but he'd like to. But anyway, he's been on X complaining about, you know what these lefties are like, where they try, or communists or whatever you call them, what they're like with this, the genocide needs to stop, and all this, and complaining about it, and the crocodile tears, saying how terrible it is. But he spent years slagging off, sabotaging, slandering white nationalists, and from what I can see, about between 95 and 99% of Hope Not Hate's work is targeting British groups, I say pro-British groups. It depends how you look at some of them, whether you consider Tommy Robinson or Nigel Farage to be pro-British or not, but supposedly pro-British people like National Front, BNP, Patriotic Alternative, and then your others like your EDLs and your UKIPs and things like that. Hope Not Hate spends about between 95 and 99% of their work targeting us, and then they spend between 1 and 5% of their work targeting extremist Muslim groups, which is basically just to say that they're not just targeting us, they sort of target them a bit, but they do nothing to target groups like Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. I'm a white nationalist, I'm a racial nationalist, I'm obviously white, I support white people's right to survive, right to continue as a race, right to self-determination in our own countries. And Hope Not Hate will condemn me for that. They'd make up a load of lies as well, but they'd also condemn me for the truth. And but then you've got other racial nationalists that aren't white racial nationalists, they're Jewish racial nationalists, or Zionists as they're called. Some don't even call themselves Zionists, but they still are Jewish racial nationalists. And Hope Not Hate won't criticise them. Hope Not Hate has got people like Ruth Smeeth or Ruth Anderson or whatever you call her now on the board. Joe Mulhall, who's been involved in Jewish groups before. Some of these people probably aren't involved in Hope Not Hate anymore, or not officially anyway, not on the payroll. But you've got Liron Velleman, you've got Rebecca, what's her name? I spoke to her, or I either spoke to her or someone who looked like her outside the train station once. Rebecca, the girl called Rebecca anyway, and they're all involved in Jewish organisations. They're all part of the Jewish labour movement and things like that. And Hope Not Hate will not condemn groups like Campaign Against Anti-Semitism for their open racism, their support for genocide. They condemn white nationalists for supposedly supporting Putin and things like that. But Putin's not doing anything anywhere near as bad as Israel. It's that with Israel-Ukraine, that's two armies fighting each other. With Israel-Gaza, it's an army, well, military, including the Air Force and whatever, fighting against mainly a civilian population. And again, all that you can Hope Not Hate condemn is Israel or the Israeli government for doing it, but they won't call out the people here supporting it. They won't call out people in the House of Lords and House of Commons or newspaper people or anyone like that. And in fact, like I said, I don't know if Nick Lowles or anyone from Hope Not Hate was at Sunday's protest, but they've been at plenty of protests, or they've been at least one protest and supported other ones like the Golders Green one 10 years ago, things like that. They support these groups that are calling for genocide. And if it was white groups doing that, if we had an anti-Russia phobia protest in London where we all marched down the road waving both Union flags and Russian flags and complained about attacks on Russian people in London, either real or imaginary, and things like that, they would condemn us for it. And if we were saying that Russia hadn't gone far enough in their war in Ukraine and saying that Russian soldiers shouldn't be tried for rape and things like that, they Hope Not Hate would be condemning us for it, but they won't do that when it's their people doing it, which shows what hypocrites they are. When they're only against one race for being supposedly racist, then they are the ones that are actually being racist. And again, it probably comes down to their financial backing, a lot of it. But all of these groups that try and, it's like stand up to racism. I've put a video that's done quite well on YouTube Shorts. It's got 140,000 views now, where I was asking them how many refugees they think we should take, because there's about 123 million displaced people in the world, and a lot more than that would if they thought they could get into Britain, would gladly displace themselves. But I'm asking them that, and a lot refused to answer, and some said all of them, but clearly none of them had actually thought about it. But they call me racist. They probably call most people on this live stream racist. But they're the ones trying to replace our race. They're the ones that want us wiped out. We're not trying to wipe anyone out. If I was to go with the same opinions that I've got here in Britain, if I was to be going out to another country with another, like a non-white country, like an African country other than South Africa, and saying, oh, we want all this, we want that, and saying roughly what I say here, but in another country, I understand that would be wrong. But these people that consider themselves to be anti-racist, they want the white population of the world replaced. They're not anti-racist, they're anti-white. And like I've said as well, when they say there's plenty of room for immigrants, no room for racists, what they need to take on board is the fact that most of these immigrants are racist. They haven't been brought up with all this left-wing propaganda that we've got in schools. An Asian wants his daughter to marry an Asian. A proper black man wants his daughter to marry a black man. A proper white man wants his daughter to marry a white man. It's perfectly natural. I don't believe it's wrong when Asians do it. I don't believe it's wrong when blacks do it. And it's definitely not wrong when white people do it. And most of these immigrants are, as I wouldn't even call it racist, but as realist or pro their own race as we are. So it's absolutely preposterous that they'd say that they just assume that all these immigrants coming here are anti-racist. But you see when there's conflict somewhere in the world and they all start fighting each other, that they're not. They're all for their own race. They only come here as economic migrants, and they don't care about this anti-racism. Of course, they jump on the bandwagon when they think they can get something out of it. If the blacks want reparations for the supposed slavery of their ancestors centuries ago, even though it's proven that they were enslaved by their own people, probably got and the main beneficiary from slavery that's alive today is the descendants of those slaves, because if it wasn't for slavery, rather than them being born here, America, or in the Caribbean, they'd either be born in Africa or wouldn't have been born at all because their ancestors would have been killed. So the people that benefited from slavery the most are the black, not the black Africans, but the black Americans and black Caribbeans, and the ones that are now here but would have been in the Caribbean previously. So they're the main beneficiaries of that. And deep down they know it. Deep down they know it. There's a lot of resentment. I remember Richard Edmonds told me, because he used to be a school teacher in London, and he taught black African and black Caribbean boys. And he said you couldn't sit them down next to each other or they'd start fighting, because like back then they literally hated each other, because the Caribbean ones knew that their ancestors had been enslaved by the people that were left in Africa. So, but deep down they know they're not owed any reparations. But if someone's willing to talk reparations, they're willing to campaign for them. And that's what it is. The blacks want more stuff for the blacks. The Asians want more stuff for the Asians. Obviously, there are only little groups within that rather than as one. But they're not campaigning because they hate racism. They're campaigning because they want more for themselves and for their own people. Same with apartheid. And if you was to go up to an average black person in the street and say, oh, what do you think of apartheid? And they'd probably say, oh, it was terrible, and this, that, and the other, speaking about it from a South African point of view about this apartheid in South Africa. But then if you was to talk to them a bit more, and the actual, without it being South African apartheid, just like apartheid means separateness, and to talk about separateness or apartheid in general, most blacks support it. Even Diane Abbott. Diane Abbott sent her son to school, to sixth form, in an African country because she supports separateness or apartheid. Like I said, not South African apartheid, but more modern apartheid. She wanted her son to be educated by black teachers in a black country with black police officers and things like that, because ironically for her, Hackney, where she lived at the time, was too white. So most blacks aren't against apartheid in theory. They're obviously against the South African apartheid where they were lower class citizens, but they just want more for themselves. And they'd love to have an apartheid where they was above us, which is what we're really heading to. But they're not anti-racist. Like I said, virtually nobody is anti-racist. You've got some white self-hating liberals, but even a lot of the whites that you see on these protests aren't anti-racist. They're either homosexuals, or some of them are Irish, or they might come from some other demographic that has got a resentment for Britain or a resentment for family values, and they're more against that than they are against racism. Probably out of a whole crowd of people from Stand Up to Racism, you've probably got like 5 or 10% are self-hating white liberals who are anti-racist, and then the rest of them just want more for their own little group, whether it's homosexuals or a racial group or something, or just want the world to fall apart because they hate either white people or Britain. That's about all I've got to say for today. Again, I apologise for the problem with the comments. What I'll probably do is, I'll definitely have another live stream next Thursday, so in 8 days' time at 7:30. And at some stage in the meantime, I'll try and go online again and do a quick 5-minute live stream just to try and iron out any glitches. I think the picture seems a lot better than it normally is. It might be a little bit dark. Like I said, I'm going to work on the lighting. I won't be filming in my studio next week because I'll be in London. But the following week, I'll be back out here in the studio. But it'll be, for the next 2 weeks at least, it'll be Thursdays at 7:30. So I'll get a new live stream set up for that. Again, I apologise for not properly going through the comments. I appreciate that people do take the time to comment. It is, I've had a brilliant response from the past few live streams I've had with people commenting, and even if people do ask awkward questions, I do usually try to answer them. The only reason I haven't today is because I haven't really been able to see them properly without disturbing the camera too much. So I'm going to call it a day now. Like I said, thank you very much everyone for coming on. I appreciate it greatly, and hopefully as many people as possible can come on next week. Okay, then. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.